It's late in the afternoon, and this we usually refer to as the graveyard shift. Tummies are full and eyes are heavy and people are dozing off. But I'm going to try to make this as interesting as I can. I'm going to start with a story. In Africa, we tell stories, and so this father comes home and is very tired, and all he wants to do is sit in his recliner and read a magazine, but he's got a 10-year-old son that keeps nagging, "Daddy, please play with me." And he's thinking, now how can he get this kid to settle down, do something different? "No, Daddy, I want you to play with me." And he's reading this magazine, and there on the page he sees a map of the world. So he tears out the page, breaks it into like 100 pieces, gives it to the kid with some scotch tape and says, "Go put the world together." Well, he's thinking to himself, this is probably going to keep him busy for hours. Rest at last. Lo and behold, 10 minutes later, the kid comes back and there he's got a rudimentary, put together map of the world. So the dad says, "That's impossible. How could you have done that?" He said, "Dad, it was simple. On the other side of the page was a picture of a wind turbine. And when I got the wind turbine in order, the world was okay too." I got to contextualize where I'm coming from. I was always responsible for corporate social investments. For about 10 plus years, I was involved in corporate, and I was doing corporate social responsibility, corporate social investment. And for 3 years, I entered into the renewable energy space, suddenly realized what renewable energy was about, and then came across this whole thing about the 50-kilometer radius, the SED commitments, ED commitments, and I thought, well, I'm going to be focusing on that now, and looking into what does this huge opportunity that has come to South Africa mean for these local communities. So that is basically what motivated me to do my PhD on this subject. But it's coming out of that space. I always found myself in the middle of the corporate on the one hand and communities. Now that's not a very, well, let me just put it to you, it's an exciting place to be, because you always seem to be torn between the two. But there's a real struggle. Corporates have a real struggle, and renewable energy is no different. Renewable energy coming into South Africa with this very basic understanding of the reprogram, the basic understanding of shareholder, and if it's a basic understanding for the corporate, it's almost a complete foreign understanding for the local community. They don't know what it means to be a shareholder. And so it's that constant struggle. And this led me to go into the study. How do we, from where we are right now, manage the revenue, but eventually allow the communities to manage their own revenue? Because you can't continue to spoon feed the communities for the next 20 years and hope that when you end, that the community will actually be better off than what it was when you started. So this is the struggle, this is the tension, and this is a very real tension. I worked for 3 renewable energy companies, 2 wind farms and a solar farm, and in the one wind farm area, there are 7 wind farms. So you have 7 trusts being shareholders with an average population of around 40,000 people. And we worked it out after about 10 years, you're going to have 100 million rand going into that community every year. And of course, Doreen mentioned about migrations of people. As soon as the people find out this, they're going to start migrating. I mean, in the Northern Cape in Kathu, we have a number of mining companies, and you also have these 4 solar farms. Over a period of 6 months, 5,000 people moved into the area. Now the mines are retrenching people, and it's causing chaos in that area. So what are some of these things that we need to look at? I need my water. That would help us in not only understanding revenue management in beneficiary communities right now, but to transition that over the next 5 to 10 years to becoming more productive, more sustainable, and more transformational. And as we go along, I'll point at some of the empirical evidence that has come out of this study. But the primary research objectives were to look at international trends. What's happening out there? What's happening globally? Because this is not new. The REAP SED-ED shareholder commitment is not new. It's existing already. It's just packaged differently in South Africa. So we have to look at global trends and where this is happening. It's not happening in the same way. We're quite unique in that, but it's still happening. Secondly, to evaluate synergies between existing guidelines and procedures related to revenue management to beneficiary communities. And then thirdly, to look at best practices. There are a number of best practices happening, but it's not being shared. Everybody's doing their own thing. Some is getting it right. Some companies are getting it hopelessly wrong, but they're not sharing. And that's very sad. And then to look at factors or variables that we can draw from all of this that says these factors can have a positive effect on revenue management. And then lastly, to develop a conceptual model, and that's what I did. Developed a conceptual model, we'll come to that a bit later, on how these factors can influence revenue management. Not only now, but looking towards the future. With everything that's happening in South Africa, with everything that's happened in the mining industry, and Marikana comes to mind. I spent a week at Wits University doing, with an Anglo-American course on where the mining industry has done well in some instances, but actually failed in many instances, and looking at where we can learn from them so that we don't make the same mistakes 20 years down the line. We're not in the same position that the mining industry is in, where there's a failed community where people are protesting to the point where we're at the Marikana. So what's happening out there in these other sectors? So, secondary research objectives is to construct a theoretical model that would describe the relationship between the different variables. To develop a measuring instrument, and just a scientific name for a questionnaire. In America they call it surveys. To test the relationship with this conceptual model. And then to empirically test the conceptual model and suggest hypotheses by sourcing primary data from renewable energy experts. And believe me, I had to literally track them down. We need to understand that renewable energy in South Africa is still very young. Very few companies, and certainly the company that I worked for, Cookhouse, was one of the first companies to reach COD. So they were struggling in the beginning with revenue management, especially the quarterly reports and getting the money out of the bank. That was a huge struggle. And to find people that were getting it right, find people that were willing to give it, to express an opinion, that was quite a journey. And then to discuss the results and to interpret the results and to suggest or recommend possible interventions that could be used to assist IPPs with more effective revenue management. So this is the model. Now, what we did was, did a lot of reading, looked at international trends, looked, and starting with globally, then looked at Europe, looked at India, looked at the BRICS nations, then looked at Africa, what's happening in corporate social responsibility, what are they doing out there, and what makes us different, and what in many instances is similar to them. And we came up with 10 variables. In other words, the approach was a positivistic approach to it, to say that outside advice, for example, has a positive influence on the perceived success of revenue management. And so, financial management, is that important? Is change management important? Should you have experts in managing the changes that's happening in that community? Because it's as new to them as it's new to the IPP. So should that be managed? Should you have a specialization? Everybody says education. And we've found a number of instances where education, if not viewed in a holistic way, actually becomes quite detrimental to the community. Strange enough. And then looking at support services, looking at strategic planning, strategic partnerships, looking at what's that last one there? Project management. We found that some community liaison officers who were active during construction and suddenly had to become project managers during post-COD. They found it incredibly difficult to spend large sums of money quarterly. And they viewed this as, we got to spend it every quarter, we got to spend it, and then the whole sword of Damocles of termination points, and you got to spend, and that was quite daunting. So there's a lot of things that affected this whole understanding of revenue management. And then an intervening variable that came up was good governance. In all of these things, good governance stays prominent. So without good governance, these things fall flat. You can't simply appoint a consultant and hope for the best. If you don't give a clear scope of work, if you don't have policies in place and a strategy in place, they just go crazy. I was quite surprised at the number of consultants that sprung up as a result of the SED-ED commitments. I mean, it's just all over the place. There was even lawyer firms that suddenly were providing consulting in socioeconomic development. They haven't got a clue about socioeconomic development, but they were offering the service. You had this huge transition from people who were just ordinary community workers suddenly becoming specialist ED managers and causing chaos because of the huge responsibility of revenue management.
2 minutes, Rick.
2 minutes more.
Yep.
Okay, we got to move. So, just an idea of the demographics. Total respondents, 219, and it was very difficult getting 219 people to answer the questionnaire. Quite understandable because of the very small sector. But what's interesting is that 53% was from renewable energy. Given the time of the study, where there were 46 IPPs that had reached COD, we managed to get 53% of them to respond. And then got some from community, and a very small percentage, I might add, also from the mining industry to respond to the questionnaire. And that's basically our demographics. Moving forward very quickly, what subsequently happened when we got the results, and we used structural equation modeling, and I must thank Professor Christo Boshoff of Stellenbosch University. He's the foremost authority on structural equation modeling, who assisted not only with the drawing up of the questionnaire, but also with the analysis of the data. We found that some of the variables fell away completely and others combined. For example, education and infrastructure development combined. So people not only saw this renewable opportunity as an opportunity to educate themselves, but they saw job creation and so forth. So we ended up with 3 models: submodel A, submodel B, and submodel C. But what does this all mean? Basically, it means that there were 3 groups of variables. The first group focused on multi-sector participation. In other words, you cannot do it alone. If you're out there trying to go it alone, you're going to fail. And you're going to have some serious backlash from those communities. You have to involve local government, and that was mentioned previously. There are ways, and we have case studies of where public-private partnerships with the local municipality actually worked, and worked well. Place in the Bend, where we did a solar street light project. Excellent, working together with the local community, with the local municipality, and we now not only have skilled artisans there that can install solar street lights, we have the community themselves protecting the street lights, not allowing to be damaged. The second submodel was transformational change. What we find here is that change in itself is not what we're looking for. Changes have come since '94, the dawn of democracy. But that change has not been transformational. How do we know this? Because when you don't involve people from the start of the project, when you do something for them, even if you build a school or a clinic, when there's problems, they burn it down. They've had a change in their community, but they are not transformed in their thinking. They haven't been part of the process. They don't feel empowered. So transformational change is vitally important. And then lastly, sustainable initiatives. Now, why we use the term initiatives here is that everything that you do as an IPP has to have an educative component. You must tell them why you're there, what you're doing. I came across a term known as social license. In other words, have you as an IPP got social license? Have you got the buy-in of the community where not only they've given you permission to build a site, but they actually value the contribution that you make, and the point that you want to reach is where they defend what you have done. So they speak on your behalf. So that's the sustainable initiative side. Just a quick commercial. So all of this has culminated in development of short learning programs for community liaison officers, for project management, specifically focused on renewable energy. So if you have people out there that needs training in this and looking at case studies, looking at templates, looking at checklists that we've developed, we will be offering this at CPUT next year. Thank you. Awesome.